Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Innovation Deciphered. And today I'm going to be joined by Claire Smith, the editor of New Civil Engineering magazine, and we've got an interesting array of topics to talk about, starting with Claire's perspective on how innovation has changed throughout her career, her 25-year career, and in particular reflecting on the research she did for an event celebrating the 50th anniversary of New Civil Engineering magazine, where she went back over the archives. And there's one or two utter disasters from which she thinks has stimulated lots of innovation. We'll be hearing about that. We'll also be hearing about the latest, what she found out at the Tech Fest, which was very recent. And finally, her reflections on how the gender mix is changing in construction and how that is beneficial not only to the industry but society as a whole. So, without any further ado, let's get stuck in.
Hi Tim.
We organised this recording, or at least we suggested it, at the NCE 50th anniversary evening reception.
Yeah, so back in May last year.
Back in May. And both of us are so massively busy, it's staying this long. This has been recorded in November, by the way, at the end of November, to get us together. And this new season of our podcast is all about innovation management. And really, I'm really interested in your perspective, looking back, let's say, on what you've seen and what you learned researching that event, around what's happened over the last 50 years, perhaps in the industry, and then we move on to some more what it's been like to work in the industry, perhaps over the last 25 years, and how you've seen it change.
Yeah, so it was really interesting researching all the stuff for the 50th anniversary. We went all the way back through all the old issues, looking at milestone events. So one of the journalists I work with made a comment about NCE being ambulance chasers. So there were a lot of collapses and failures and things like that, as well as engineering successes. But I think those failures are really, really important to actually understand about what went wrong and understand how we can improve and things like that. And looking at innovation, where the risks are and that kind of thing.
Yes, because I know one of the big failures that's happened during my career was the Heathrow Tunnel collapse.
Yes.
Back in the mid-90s.
94. I was in the first year of my degree, so we were following it very closely in NCE. So.
Yeah, I mean, personal anecdote about that, because at the time I was in a joint venture and I was in a Balfour Beatty office when the phone went that this had happened. And of course, it was a very interesting. Very stressful for everybody at the time, but there was a massive energy going into solving that problem that I just witnessed, but I was very close to it, not at the coalface, but from the office side of things at the time. But what was your perspective about how engineering moved forward following that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So it came up at a tunnelling roundtable that I organised recently that was actually looking at how tunnelling industry had changed over the 50 years as part of the 50th anniversary celebrations. And we were again looking at milestone events. So the Channel Tunnel opening of that in 1994 came out. You know, that had been attempted so many times, but the innovation had finally caught up with the ambition. But then the Heathrow collapse came out as also being a milestone event. But people were talking about it, how it was an awful situation at the time, but all the analysis that went into what went wrong and understanding the sprayed concrete linings in more detail really enabled Crossrail to happen in the way it did. And they were saying almost if the Heathrow collapse hadn't happened, that perhaps Crossrail wouldn't have been delivered as it was, which I found really fascinating.
Yes, and I sort of had a peripheral involvement in all of those projects one way or another, and there's been a massive movement over my career around data analysis, instrumentation, and now there's unbelievable quantities of data collected, but it's also analysed in real time now.
Yeah, so I think that's a real difference when you go back to the Heathrow collapse. there were monitors and there were lots of sensors there, so there was an awful lot of data, but there wasn't the ability to actually analyse it and understand it quickly.
So is that through technology that's enabled that, or is it the protocols have been developed to
I think it's a
quickly...
little bit of both. So I think the technology is there to analyse it and produce and work out whether it's something you should be aware of, something you need to take action on, or whether it's fine. So that's the real difference.
Yes, because in terms of what you see, say, on the Crossrail, compared with what you read about on Heathrow Express, what do you think are the real differences?
I think there was far more knowledge about what the risks were going into it, so there was a lot more instrumentation done, a lot more grouting done ahead of the works to try and just prevent anything happening. So I think obviously the Jubilee line in the 90s, that was another key one. We're tunnelling under the Queen Elizabeth Tower for Big Ben. That was a really high profile job that really put data and analysis and monitoring at the forefront of the work.
That's right, there was a lot of work done at Imperial by
John Burland.
I remember he had his, I won't say his party piece, but we used to have this great presentation about it, all the work they did to analyse it. They got exactly the movement right.
Yeah.
Just the direction wrong by 180 degrees.
But
that was the modelling the stiffness of the clay. It was stiffer than they thought.
Mm-hmm.
So that, but again, that shows how it's moved on again.
Yes.
Because of course, Crossrail itself is another step forward in terms of the scale of the caverns that produce. And as far as I'm aware, there wasn't any undue problems at surface level that weren't corrected by...
I guess we might find out in the courts in the next few years, but not that I'm aware of.
No. So, I mean, so it's either completely successful or so successful you wouldn't notice as a passerby.
No, but it's open now, and I think when you go down there and look at the scale of those caverns, it's quite breathtaking. They're almost like cathedrals, aren't they, to underground space?
They are, and I know, I mean, for instance, all the spray concrete tunnel work there, which is created those caverns, the procedures used there were massively influenced over what had been learned from Hex.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
In terms of controlling the movement, but also safety of actually constructing the things from the operative's point of view. I know there was a tragedy, but it was largely successful.
Yes, yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, big, amazing project. So there's, in a sense, I suppose the debate is that innovation can be stimulated by overcoming a disaster, which
definitely.
obviously Hex definitely was. What about do you see have you seen a trend in other parts of innovation in the construction sector? Obviously we talked a lot about tunnels, but
obviously we were talking there about the data analysis, and I think that's the real change, is data flows through the whole construction process now, and it's far more technology led. The analysis of the design even before you get onto the construction site, as well as analysing what's happening when you're building it. So it flows all the way through, but the one area I think perhaps is not happening enough is the data flowing through into the operation. It ends up being siloed, or companies aren't sharing data.
Yes. So we've seen that in our work, where there's huge amounts of data produced, not only of the finished article now, with these 3D twins and what have you. But there's also a lot of data about how you get there, how you get to the finished article, and how the thing's built, the progress type. There's technology out there that's literally videoing everything as it goes on. It counts the number of trucks going through the gate and all these sort of spotting safety hazards. That's all in the pipeline.
But what I think is even more interesting, before that, people are using that technology to actually rehearse the construction. So they're actually using that to help with the safety. They're actually allowing operatives to see how things are going to be built, the sequencing, and it really helps unlock whether there's a problem on site. So you're reducing the number of errors on site.
So is that concept of the 3D method statement?
Yes,
exactly. The 4D method statement.
Yes, because you've got the time involved as well, yeah. So I think there's lots more movement. So a lot of major projects use that at the moment, but I think we will gradually see that filtering down onto smaller projects.
And I know some of that, I think that's also reflected in what a working day or working life looks like. Because I know when we were having our discussions before this with our editor, Ashley, who's, I think I'm older than her parents. She's definitely young enough to be my daughter, but
we were reflecting back on what our working lives were like.
Exactly. So a generation ago, 25 or 35 years ago, no one had a computer, or there was one in the corner that was used for some sort of simple analysis.
Yeah, we had we had one computer between about 5 of us, but there would be days where it didn't get switched on. I had a secretary to type up my reports, and a stack of 20p's to call the office if something went wrong on site.
I can remember the days where I used to be travelling from site to site during the day. I was working in the piling industry, and if the office wanted to get a message to you, they would ring the concrete batcher and say, well, the next time the foreman rings you, could you ask him to pass the message on that we'd like to speak to Tim?
Yeah.
And it speaks to the youth of today, like they wouldn't believe it.
No, it feels like a lifetime ago, but that's only going back 25 years. So I think it's easy to think that the construction industry hasn't taken up technology, but it has come quite a long way. Maybe not as fast as some other industries, but it is moving that way. And I think the pandemic certainly was a driver for the faster uptake of technology.
There's no doubt about that, because I think we've seen it with our clients and ourselves that where there may have been some resistance, for instance, something as simple, and it sounds quite ludicrous now as a video conferencing or a Teams call.
But how many people were using Teams before March 2020? We'd just started maybe in February 2020, but we didn't really know
we had the technology, but I didn't use it.
No.
On the, whatever it was, the 18th of March, within 10 minutes,
it all changed.
I worked out how to use it, and that was never looked back.
No, exactly.
Because we had no choice. And now, of course, you suddenly realise, well, for a lot of things, it's massively more efficient.
But I think also the technology that we've got means that people can collaborate more easily. They don't have to be in the same office, they don't have to be even in the same time zone, but they can collaborate and bring their skills into a project more easily that way.
No, that's right. So you're quite right, because we've got customers over 8 time zones.
So do you ever get to sleep?
Look, that's actually a very important point, because you can communicate with people who are 8 hours, in our case, behind us, but it's not practical in the long run.
No.
Because you can only, unless you want to, if you're working a normal shift in the UK and you've got clients in Vancouver, which we have, you can only really talk to them very early in their morning.
Which is quite late in your
you get
day.
a very, very extended working day, and that's once in a blue moon you can do it. You can't really plan to do that.
But that's one of the reasons why I've seen MCE change. I mean, we've gone from being weekly to being monthly, but when I was doing some research for the 50th anniversary, it turned out it was originally a monthly magazine. It was only the recruitment side of the business that drove it to become weekly. But now, of course, we've gone back to monthly. But effectively, we're like a daily news service, because we have online news. We're putting out 10 news stories a day. But everyone wants everything instantly. It's like something happened over the weekend, so why haven't you written a news story about it? So it is that thing, everyone wants information instantly. So that is the challenge with data, isn't it?
Yeah, the world has sped up
yes.
that way, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Because everything's quicker now. I mean, if you think what you can do on the phone, or, I wouldn't say I could absolutely manage my business on the phone.
But it's basically a mini computer in your pocket.
Yeah, quite a powerful one, as it turns out. So there's, and you're right, the way the working environment has changed over our careers is massive. It's changed a lot in the past 2.5 years because of the pandemic and our response to it.
But I do wonder whether the greater move to technology means that we might become more of an attractive industry for people to come into. Because that's always been a challenge, hasn't it, attracting new people into the sector? It
is, and of course, because it's associated with being noisy, dirty, dangerous, all of which is partly true.
But it's definitely not anymore. There are a lot of desk-based jobs.
There's many.
Oh, you don't
But
have
of course,
to go on site.
I'm sure it won't be long before all the machines are driven remotely. If you can fly a drone into a power station remotely, why can't you drive a digger remotely with all the right sensors and things?
So going back to that tunnelling round table, they were talking about the fact they've got automatic machinery for placing the segments, the concrete segments in the tunnel. Saying how long will it be before they're all driven remotely by robots? So you don't actually need to go down there.
Well, it won't be that long, I don't suppose.
So NC's 75th anniversary, maybe we'll be writing about that?
You may be writing about it. I'll be hobbling in.
I don't think I'll be editor there.
I'll be hobbling in to that one. But yeah, at least we can look forward to that and say, what would it be like in 25 years' time? Let's just move on a little bit, because I know whilst we're recording this, Tech Fest was last week. We've got some observations about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting, sort of like how many people are really engaged in how the innovations have changed the industry. But I think you only got a very small group of the industry there who are really engaged in innovation. A lot of people are kind of still not kind of looking at what they're doing. They're still so focused on the day-to-day jobs. But I think there's this concern that innovation means that you've got to retrain and relearn how to do your job. So the technology providers really need to focus on things that are easy to use, that actually make a difference in terms of efficiency and productivity. Because like if you've got to lose a couple of weeks to go and train to use a new bit of software, where's the productivity gain in that?
Well, I think a lot of those things the providers have to demonstrate the ROI. That's one thing for sure. I think the other thing, your point you were making around people have to retrain. Well, I remember a few years ago now, I judged one of the sectors, one of the prizes at TechFest. And this one, it was very interesting because all the technology was there. It was actually no one was looking at the data in the right way. So a lot of innovation, I think, sometimes is asking the right question.
Yeah.
If you can ask the right question, then you've got half a chance of gathering the data to answer that question.
So it's quite interesting. A lot of people talk about construction projects and focusing on the outcome of those. And I think that's the thing, we need to start thinking about the outcome when we're looking at data. Where are we trying to get to? What kind of information are we trying to get?
Yeah, what's the question you're trying to answer?
Yeah.
What's the big question? And that isn't anything to do really with the technology. The technology is the enabler. Mm-hmm. If the data's being gathered or you need another sensor, if you know what the question is you want answered, then you can ask someone to either create the sensor or install it, and then get a routine for analysing the data. Yeah,
because some of the innovations that were coming out at TechFest were quite straightforward. You're thinking, well, why have we been doing that before? I mean, that's what I love about TechFest, is it's a chance to actually shout about some of these innovations that otherwise might fly under the radar. And one of the things I really love is the Innovation Incubator, where we get people who are from startups and SMEs and actually come and present it on the main stage, and so they get a chance to actually show their innovation to a wider audience. And there were a lot of conversations about that. So we had Hypertunnel there and Geooptic ground investigations as well. So they were really fascinating innovations that could really disrupt the industry.
See, the Hypertunnel, I mean, what's your views on that? Because I know Mr. Musk has got a similar idea. I'm not sure quite where it's sitting at the moment.
So Hypertunnel, they've got a project with Network Rail, so they're going to be doing a demonstration tunnel next year, and I think that's when it's going to become really interesting, when you can actually see physically how it's built. At the moment it's a lot of theory, and I think that's where the judges felt that they hadn't quite got there to win this year. But
good idea, but not quite proven.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. That is always the problem with the construction industry. They want proven technology. And that's the one thing that does limit us on innovation, is the risk, isn't it? Particularly on the underground side of things.
You're right, because I mean, innovation during the construction phase always imports risk. So there has to be a massive payback for anyone.
Yeah.
To really take that risk.
But that's where I think HS2 is doing a lot of good work, is they've got this understanding that they're a long-term client, and they're trying to make sure that they are bringing forward innovations So it's like they're working with SCS on 3D concrete printing. Not necessarily saying it's the perfect solution for everything, so they're trying to use it on low risk applications, like some waste storage bins they're printing on site rather than getting precast brought in and testing it and analysing there. So I think it is important that major clients do take on some of that burden and actually try and help prove new technology.
Well, for those that haven't seen it, we actually have an episode dedicated to the Innovation on Speed 2 with Howard, who's the Innovation Director, which was a very fascinating talk, by the way.
I haven't seen it, so
no, we haven't
I've done
published
a free
it yet.
promo.
It is in the tank. It will be published early in the new year. But of course, it's not just about technology, how the industry's changing, Claire, because I know that another recent event you chaired was around women in construction, women in the engineering profession.
Yes, we came together with Construction News this year to launch the Inspiring Women in Construction Engineering event, and really to talk about the gender issues and things like that. So things have moved on tremendously since I joined the industry. So I chaired the event and we had 250 people in the room and probably 230 women. And I said right from the beginning when I stood up, I said, I have never been at a work event in 25 years, like as an engineer or as a journalist, with so many women in the room. And it was amazing. And the feeling in the room was really good as well, the fact that everyone wanted to come together and try and make a positive change and work together to do that.
And what was that representative of, well, obviously it's something to do with there's more women in the sector, but to get such a massive swing of the pendulum the other way at an event, obviously it was targeted at women, I guess.
Yeah, it was, and I think probably what I'd like to see next year is actually the audience being more 50-50, because it's not women over men, it's about us moving forward together. So you meet male allies in the industry to understand what the challenges are for women so that they can support their staff and actually move forward, so we can get more women progressing up through the career ladder and actually retain them, because a lot of women go and have a family and then find perhaps working in construction and infrastructure doesn't quite fit. Maybe it does a bit more now, we can do the distance working, but to try and make sure that people do stay in the industry, because I think that's the thing, we need more engineers. So getting more women in the industry has got to be a good way of doing that.
You're right, and we've got two, they're architects actually, two female architects, both we've got toddlers. In fact, no, Sarah baby's about 5 months old, not quite a toddler. No. Shard's has a toddler. So this kind of role, which is essentially office based or working partly from home,
it works well.
It works well, yeah. Well, even my wife, we've got 2 teenagers. It works for my wife as well, Alison.
Yeah, so I think that the industry is changing. It's much easier to stay in the sector. And I think that it's not just about getting more women in the industry, I think it's about having the diversity. So you end up with, so it comes back to that outcomes side of things. If you're designing infrastructure, you want to design it for the whole of society. So you actually want the engineers who are working on that to be representative for the people using it. So things get thought about more, about the accessibility and that kind of thing.
I think you're right. The more the workplace represents the society you're in, I think it's probably better for everybody, and also the pool of people that are available then.
And the type of solutions you get as well.
Yeah, you're right. They're really different. Anyway, Claire, that's been a fascinating discussion around your perspectives on how the industry's innovated over the past 50 years or 25 to 50 years, because you've got this great overview. So thank you very much for your time today, and
thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.